Following a hearing in the Senate committee sent the rules back to the Commission requesting unspecified modifications. We agreed to consider those modifications. It is no secret these were difficult rules for us to reach agreement on. We each made compromises and not one of us got everything we wanted. But the fact that we all were a little unhappy with the final product should perhaps be comforted in that it is reflective of a balanced package that was ultimately sent downtown. In suggesting modifications today, my hope is to not upset that balance, but rather to make some limited revisions that I believe will significantly improve the chances that the rules survive legislative scrutiny and allow promulgation to finally proceed. Local governments in this state, the wind development community, and potentially affected landowners need to know what the rules are. I think it is critical that we get these rules done. To that end, and subject to hearing my colleagues out, I will be supporting the modifications included in the December 1st Commission memo. The modifications in the Commission memo, in my mind, fall into generally three categories. First, technical non-substantive revisions. Second, additions concerning specific agricultural interests. And third, modifications to two of the key landowner mitigation provisions. First, the technical modifications. These were in large part identified by Commission staff over the last several weeks. They include the suggested revisions to the rules applicability provisions and proposed PSC 12802, located on pages 2 and 3 of the Commission memo, as well as the revisions to the small wind energy system provisions in proposed 128 sub 60 and 128 sub 61 on page 11 of the Commission memo. The applicability revisions are necessary for the rule to more accurately reflect what the law actually is, and revisions to the small wind provisions simply add necessary but previously omitted subsection references. I also consider the decommissioning revisions largely technical in nature. These revisions to proposed PSC 128 sub 19 are located on pages 6, 7, and 8 of the memo. When we adopted the final rules in August, it was my intent that the rules would have allowed wind energy system owners a choice of financial instruments to use in providing financial assurance for system decommissioning, as long as such instrument or combination of instruments indeed ensure the availability of funds necessary for that decommissioning. However, it appears that PSC 128 sub 19 sub 3 sub C sub 2 currently included could be interpreted as inconsistent with owner optionality. The revisions to the decommissioning provisions on pages 6, 7, 8 of the memo are meant to clarify and remove that inconsistency. Beyond those technical revisions, there are a number of substantive additions in the proposed modifications that concern and address specific agricultural interests. These include the modification of proposed PSC 128 sub 12 on page 4 of the Commission memo, and the modification of 128 sub 18 on pages 5 and 6. Those modifications were initially raised by the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, and are meant to ensure harmony between our wind studying rules and Wisconsin's recently enacted farmland preservation law. I do support them. I also support the proposed aerial spraying modifications located on pages 10 and 11 of the memo. Potato and vegetable growing and the related vegetable food processing industry are obviously important and substantial components of the state's economy, and aerial spraying is a piece of that. If our rules need to allow for some form of compensation in the event that new wind installations interfere with aerial spraying in certain specified growing areas of the state, I can then support the rules as modified. Finally, there are proposed modifications to the landowner mitigation provisions, namely setbacks and what we've been referring to as good neighbor payments. Back in August, while we were debating these rules the first time, I advocated for noise and shadow flicker performance standards only, in lieu of any fixed minimum setback requirement for non-participating residences and occupied community buildings that went beyond the 1.1 safety setback. My view didn't prevail at that time. The current version of the rule includes a 3.1 times maximum blade tip height setback as a fallback setback, meant to provide a minimum comfort zone in limited instances where noise and shadow flicker performance standards do not necessitate enough of a setback distance. I'm fine with keeping in the minimum setback option for local governments to use, in addition to the noise and shadow flicker performance standards that are in the rules. However, I support the lesser of 1,250 feet or 3.1 times maximum blade tip height for non-participating residences and occupied community buildings as set forth on page 5 of the memo. My primary concern is that the 3.1 standard has the potential to unduly penalize technological innovation in cases where higher turbines that actually produce less noise have to be set back farther than a shorter, louder turbine. 1,250 feet is what we used in Glacier Hills, and I'm comfortable with that standard today. Regarding good neighbor payments, I support the modifications on pages 9 and 10 of the Commission memo. I believe these modifications are an improvement because they decouple the good neighbor payments from the amounts agreed to with the host. This allows the substance of the host agreements to remain confidential and removes the potential disincentive to attractive host agreements. Proposed modifications also put everyone, developers, local governments, and landowners, on notice of what they're entitled to or what they are potentially obligated to pay. Finally, these modifications allow the maximum payment amounts to reflect the degree of landowner impact by tying the allowable maximum to the number of turbines within a half mile. Our previously adopted rule would have allowed the same payment amount for a landowner who had 5 turbines within a half mile as someone with only 1 turbine within a half mile of the residence. This modification is consistent with the approach that I advocated for in the Glacier Hills docket. As I said at the outset, I support the modifications in the commission memo, and I hope that today we're able to reach agreement so that we can finish this rulemaking and finally put in place a balanced package of studying rules for new wind development in Wisconsin.
I'm going to be very brief. I think the chairman did a good job covering the eight items that were being proposed for change here today. I want to start by thanking the Wind Siting Council and Chairman Plummer, PSC Chair Dan Ebert, for the good work that they did. I think I'm hard pressed to think of my time in government where I've seen a group of citizens come together and take up an issue that is as complex and heavy as this one was and come up with the work product that they did in the amount of time they did. It really was a good process. Again, I'm at my good and better, not perfect stance on this rule. Rather than get into the 8 proposed changes, just to say that the 2 that gave me the most pause were the good neighbor payments and the setback changes. But I'm willing to live with those changes in the spirit of compromise, move this forward, because I think at the end of the day, having this rule in place is better than the situation we're in right now. So I'm prepared to support the changes outlined in the memo.
The modifications proposed in the staff memo are generally good modifications to make a good rule even better. The rule in total strikes a good balance between the need for clear and consistent standards that will provide a framework for additional wind development in the state, and at the same time protect the health and safety of Wisconsin residents and landowners. While there are some areas that I wish we could have pushed the envelope further on, I am generally comfortable moving forward with the rule incorporating the suggested modifications. There is one modification, however, I am uncomfortable with, and it gives me pause. It's the lesser of standard and the setbacks identified in Table 1. Part of the beauty of using a multiplier rather than hard distance is that the rule will continue to make sense even in light of changing technologies. The lesser of standard eliminates some of the flexibility and may require the Commission to revisit the distance as technologies change. To be sure, new technologies may allow for shorter setback distances in the future. However, I'd rather the burden be on the manufacturers to show that the new technologies are quieter and safer and therefore are entitled to a shorter setback, rather than assume they be, which I think is exactly what the proposed the lesser of standard does. I was going to propose that we actually remove the lesser of language in the setback distance. As you know, I wanted even more than that and was willing to compromise and gave up my safety net provision in order to get where we are with regards to that. So I'm really quite interested in keeping the 3.1 times the maximum blade tip height, and I don't believe the legislature raised this issue.
And I understand your position, Commissioner. It's no different. I think generally we're conceptually in the same places that we were as this debate finally wrapped up before we sent the rule down. Practically speaking, I think we're in a different spot in terms of what we have to do to get the rule through. I'm trying to be pragmatic about it.
Yeah, I didn't think the legislature raised this issue, and I might be in error on that one, but.
Choose my words carefully. I'm with you. I don't like that language either, but I've been talking to members of the relevant committees here, and without this language, it's not going to fly.
Hearing that, that's what I needed to know. All right. Let them know what a big, big compromise this is, because it is. Yeah.
With that, can we have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Commission modify the wind siting rules and direct the Commission staff to prepare documents consistent with this discussion for submission to the legislature. If the legislative review period expires without further comment, or the legislature approves the rules without change, the rules may be promulgated as final rules without further Commission action.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Take it to our last